Welcome to the NBA Monday Slate Breakdown. I'm Jason Gilbo. With me is Brent Hyden. Taking a look at tonight's slate over on FanDuel and DraftKings. A lot to go around, a lot of injuries, a lot of news that kind of happened over the weekend. And this might have actually set a record for the most revenge narratives on a single slate.
Yeah, I always like to go in and make a lineup with nothing but like revenge narratives and all kinds of like birthday narratives and home game narratives. I think we might have too many players on this slate to do that. A lot of revenge games, a lot of really, really awesome games to target tonight. This is a great slate for fantasy.
Yeah, it definitely is. This first one here, Sacramento, Washington, 210 total, Washington 11-point favorites. This is the game that I think the blowout concern is definitely heavily leaning on. Some of these Washington guys that are in play, some of the Kings values are in play, but overall not one that I'm terribly interested in.
Yeah, nothing. I don't think you can touch any of these guys from either side in cash games, except maybe like a Markieff Morris from Washington, just because he's cheap enough and his minutes are already limited anyways, and he's producing fairly well in those limited minutes. But Sacramento's just been so bad this season. I mean, they've only eclipsed 100 points in 4 games. They're averaging like 95 points a game. Washington's defense has been solid recently. Like, you could look at Wall and Beal and Porter and all these Washington guys and GPPs, obviously, because they could put up a big game if this game stays close, but not really looking at anyone here.
No, I think the only guy that I had a little bit of interest in on the Sacramento side was Buddy Hield because he is so cheap still. And the fact that he is playing really well off the bench and shooting extremely well, especially from three, which, will obviously drop at some point here. But I still think he's cheap enough to take a shot on. Is probably more of a FanDuel play, his price, where you have to roster two shooting guards. But outside of that, yeah, I mean, really, like you said, there's just kind of more GPP plays if you hope this game can stay close. Those higher usage Washington guys will obviously go off.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Buddy Hield. Since coming off the bench, he's averaging 15.2 points per game on 52% shooting. Uh, that, as you mentioned, that's going to come down a little bit, but Hield was always a really efficient shooter in college. Got to watch a lot of him play here at the University of Oklahoma. Love watching him play, but yeah, I mean, GPP's there. De'Aaron Fox as well. You could use in GPPs. He's better coming off the bench anyways, and he should get 28, maybe 30 minutes, even if this game blows out.
Yeah. We can move on to somewhere where we have really a lot of interest, this Cavs Knicks game. 219 total, Cleveland 4.5 favorites. This is a spot here really where you can look at numerous plays on both sides. We'll start with the Cleveland side. I mean, I like LeBron tonight quite a bit here. I mean, just playing super heavy minutes. He's averaging 40 over the last 5 games. Been around, 60 fantasy points seemingly night in, night out. He's a tough guy that I'm going to be looking to get exposure to. I feel bad kind of fading him in some of my other lineups just because of the upside that he has, but there are so many potential moves you can make tonight.
Yeah, there really are. And I mean, this is pretty much an all narrative game for both sides. LeBron, obviously, just an excellent play. The minutes, the usage. I mean, he's gonna put up at least 45 fantasy points, and especially on DraftKings at 10-7, I would be happy with that production. Um, I actually have a lot of interest in J.R. Smith tonight, and it has nothing to do with the revenge narrative going up against the Knicks. But over his last 3 games, he's shooting really well. He's 12 from 24 from 3-point. He's averaging 16.7 points per game over those three. He's a guy when that shot starts to fall, like he stays hot. He's playing a lot of minutes for this team. If you just look, 38 against Dallas, 32 against Houston, 37 against Milwaukee, 34 against Atlanta, against a Knicks team that can struggle to defend the 3-point line. I think J.R. Smith's a great option. He's only 3,800 on DraftKings. I don't have FanDuel pulled up, but I imagine he's right around the 4K mark there. So he's a guy that I would be interested in a lot.
Yeah, he's 4,100 over on FanDuel. With Derrick Rose out, do you have any interest in some of these guards, like Iman Shumpert? You mentioned J.R. Smith, obviously, who can come in and play. Dwayne Wade, maybe.
Shumpert would be the guy that I would look at. Like, I'm not gonna try to predict a Dwayne Wade breakout game or anything like that. Shumpert would be another cheap option. I mean, he's kind of around the same price as J.R. Smith. I'd rather have J.R.
As far as Kevin Love goes tonight, I'm not really a fan of the spot. He's been playing well. I mean, we've seen some big upside games out of Love. He's a guy who, obviously very reliant on his scoring and rebounding. Knicks are a good rebounding team. They have a lot of, the lowest rebounds per game to opponents. I'm kind of off Love is newer prices.
I don't mind them. Obviously, the Knicks, one of the areas that they do struggle is against spot up shooters. They're allowing opponents to spot up about 23% of the time. They're allowing 1.06 points per spot up possession, and they're allowing opponents to shoot like 56% on those. Love definitely likes to spot up a lot. He's also an excellent roll man. The Knicks struggle to defend the pick and roll. I would use him. I would use him in GPPs. I don't think you can use him in cash games.
Anyone else there for the Cavs?
No, not really.
No, Jay Crowder, Jeff Green, those guys. I mean, these secondary role players are just incredibly hard to predict.
I have a feeling Jay Crowder may get some attention tonight, and I've been telling people to stay off him. He just doesn't look good. He's out of shape. He didn't get to practice that much during the off season. Like he had a decent game against Dallas, but like I just don't see a reason to go there.
On the Knicks side here, obviously, it starts with Porzingis. He's always kind of in that group of power forwards where he's around Blake Griffin, he's around Anthony Davis, all these other names. I mean, once again, a good spot for him tonight. He just continues to play well. The usage is through the roof. I really have no issue with him in any format.
Kristaps is one of the first guys in my lineup tonight. You mentioned the usage. He's 36% now. He leads the NBA in usage rate. He's averaging 30.4 points per game. I mean, the shot attempts are just through the roof. He has over 20 shot attempts in just about every single game this season. Um, just an excellent play tonight against a Cleveland defense that is just atrocious. Obviously, even if you don't want to go with the pissed off Knicks narrative, like after LeBron comes out and basically bashes the organization, telling them that they should have taken Dennis Smith over Frank Ntilikina, like even if you just eliminate that, like Kristaps is still one of my top plays of the night. Like I don't really see a reason to fade him. And I mean, we saw him against this Cavs team, played 35 minutes, put up 54 DraftKings points. He scored 32 points and had 12 rebounds. So I really like him a lot. And especially without Tristan Thompson in the lineup, he's going to have an opportunity to get a few extra boards.
Yep. As far as like other guys, I mean, Tim Hardaway Jr. is another one where, he's the next kind of usage guy that we look at with this next team. And he's, picked up a little bit of peripheral stats here and there. Still, shooting the ball obviously better of late. 23% usage rate. I'm okay with him at his price. He's kind of more of those guys where I'm kind of looking at maybe game stacking this one and using him in that route. I don't know if I'm going to be using much of him, but I don't mind him here.
I wrote up both Kristaps and Tim Hardaway Jr. in my GPP article today. I think Jr. just has a ton of upside in this matchup. We know Cleveland just getting decimated on 3-pointers this season. They are allowing opponents to shoot 40% from the 3-point line. And Tim Hardaway Jr. just chucks from three. I mean, he has at least 10 in like 4 or 5 games this year. We saw him put up a huge game against this Cavs team. He came out, put up 57 fantasy points. He had 34 real points. He had 36 against him in a matchup last year. He comes out and he performs really well against this Cavs team, and there's really not anyone that can defend him. So I'm building around him and Kristaps and kind of stacking those two players in my lineups.
As far as other guys go, I mean, like Courtney Lee, I have a little bit of interest in more so in the fact that if you're trying to get a lot of studs, Courtney Lee's a cheaper approach to this game. Not a ton of upside, even though he obviously went off against Cleveland last time out, which it seemed like everyone did. But Lee, I mean, he's a guy who's probably going to flirt with around 25 fantasy points at, kind of a usual expected projection. But I mean, like I said, you can't argue with these prices. 47 on FanDuel may be a little steep, but 41 on DK, I don't mind him. He's got potential for some steals as well. He's just more one of those guys that for like I'm using a Davis and I'm trying to get another guy in, I'll look at Lee.
Yeah, I mentioned with the Knicks that they struggle to defend spot up shooters. So do the Cavs. They're allowing 1.1 points per possession on spot ups about 20% of the time. Lead spots up. He spots up over 20% of the time for this Knicks team. He's just really inefficient. But as you mentioned, cheap enough at only 4,100 where he could easily hit value in cash games. And I think he has upside in GPPs if you need to go that route. I think he's excellent option. And then, of course, the point guard situation, I think I'm going to have some Frank Ntilikina in GPPs. Just averaged, like in that first game, he had over a fantasy point per minute, only played 16 minutes. Probably going to come out a little pissed off that LeBron dissed him. So I kind of like him. And at only 3,800, he's what is he on FanDuel? I think he's actually cheaper on FanDuel. Let's see. He is 4,400 on FanDuel. So I like him a little more in DraftKings than FanDuel, but he's an excellent GPP option.
Yeah, if we get him above 20 minutes tonight, I mean, obviously great spot for him. Cleveland dead last in defensive efficiency against, point guards. I'm cool with it. I like the narrative. Obviously he's been playing well. He has, big defensive upside just in terms of racking up some steals. His assists have been up to start the season. So I don't mind him here. Narrative side.
And it feels like a situation like Hornacek is an idiot when it comes to his rotations and who he's playing, but this just feels like that situation where Hornacek's going to be like, all right, Frank, go do your thing. Go play 28 minutes. Go show Cleveland that they were, or go show LeBron how wrong he was.
I hope that's the case. I mean, it would be fun to watch. It'd be good TV.
Yeah.
So, as far as front court goes, I mean, do you like Enes Kanter at all tonight?
I don't think I'm going to go there. Obviously, he had a decent game against this Cavs team last time out. Tristan Thompson played in that contest, which I think helped keep Kanter on the floor a little bit more. I think this is a situation like against the Magic last week where I predicted Kanter would get played off the floor and he wouldn't play a bunch of minutes. I think there's another situation where we could see him actually not play as many minutes because Kevin Love's going to play at the 5, and they're going to need someone like Kyle O'Quinn to defend Kevin Love. So I think I would lean O'Quinn over Kanter in the spot.
Yeah, that's the one thing I was kind of looking at, before here. These Cantor nights are basically when he's going up against lackluster offensive centers, you can kind of look at him. But like you said, Love obviously saw on the offensive side, Cantor a complete liability out there.
Yeah, he can't come out of the paint basically, or he just gets obliterated on basically pick and rolls, isolation, everything. So I don't think you can really project him to play a ton of minutes tonight.
Memphis, Milwaukee, 203 total here. Not an appealing game just in terms of fantasy goes. Slower matchup. I don't really have any interest here outside of maybe a little bit of Tyreek Evans in tournaments. He's just been playing really well. And you and I were talking about him. It just seems the increased, pricing on both sites has dropped his ownership down.
Yeah, I think there's a little concern, obviously, with the increased price. He's like 6,500 on DraftKings. I know he's up there on FanDuel as well at 6,800. That's part of the concern for me. And then obviously Ben McLemore, Wayne Selden being back could also eat into his minutes a little bit. You could look at him in GPPs. I think everybody from this game, except for maybe Marc Gasol, is GPP considerable. James Ennis, kind of interesting for cheap. He's back and he's in the starting lineup. Wings against Milwaukee, you can target that, but it's not really an appealing spot here.
No, I don't think so. I mean, these guys are just too expensive for me on the Milwaukee side. I mean, Giannis at 12K on FanDuel is kind of tough to pay that when you have some of these other options that I'd much rather use if I'm paying over 10K or even 11K for. So, this game really, outside of Evans, I don't have a ton of interest in.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we don't like taking Giannis against teams that protect the rim, and Memphis is a good rim protection team. I mean, they're only allowing opponents to shoot 59% at the rim. Not someone that I don't really want to pay that price. Like, I think he's a better play on DraftKings if you want to pay 10.8 as opposed to FanDuel, where you mentioned he's 12K. DraftKings, yes. FanDuel, no. Again, Marc Gasol is really the only guy that I really have a decent amount of interest in because his price is down and it's a good matchup for him.
Yeah, I think Gasol, 7,200 on DK is really intriguing there. He's not bad on FanDuel either. He's 76. And once again, the offense runs through him. I'm cool with using him.
Yep, he's the only one for me.
So, New Orleans, Atlanta, 218. We were talking about this just possibly being a murder scene here with Cousins and Davis against this front court.
I told you this before we started recording. Like, one of Cousins and Davis is going to be in a GPP winning lineup tonight. I just don't see how. I don't see how they can't be. Like, this is a spot where both of them could come up and come out and put up 70 plus fantasy points.
Yeah, I mean, we were joking around, I guess, but not really joking around about the potential foul trouble for Atlanta. Like they may not have like, a couple healthy, like not foul prone centers, power forwards at the end of the night. Like they may just be done.
Yeah, like I mean, they're without Plumlee. Muscala is doubtful. Ursan Ilyasova is already out. Um, Dedmon and John Collins are their two bigs that actually remotely have enough size to try to defend Cousins and Davis, and both of those guys are going to be in foul trouble in the first half. Like I would not be shocked to see John Collins foul out in the first half, and then Dedmon's going to have to play a bunch of minutes, and like he can't play. He can't play a ton of minutes against these guys. So I mean, if you ignore that part of it, I mean the Hawks giving up and just a boatload of points in the paint. They're giving up I think the most amount of rebounds per game to opponents now. It might be second after Dallas last night, but I mean, both these guys are going to come up and just put up so many points and rebounds. It's just going to be insane. Like you kind of have to have one of these guys. David or Cousins is my guy, I think, across the board. Davis, obviously, GPPs can't really trust him in cash just because, obviously he's Anthony Davis and he's going to probably roll an ankle and leave the game or something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I definitely get exposure to both those guys. As far as other New Orleans guys, I don't really have a ton of interest. Drew Holiday just really hasn't looked all that great for me this year. No real interest on this slate with those secondary guys like Etuan Moore or anything like that.
I like Etuan Moore actually a lot in the spot. We know Atlanta struggles to defend, guys that can shoot from the perimeter. There's only 4K. This is a decent spot for him. I would actually consider. I think this is one of those times where we could get a ceiling game out of Etuan Moore.
You prefer him or like Lee or J.R. Smith?
I prefer J.R. Smith, and then probably Lee over Moore and cash, Moore over Lee and GPPs.
On the other side here, Atlanta, I don't really have a ton of interest in these guys. I mean, I feel okay with using like a Kent Bazemore. I actually think he's a sneaky GPP play tonight. You look at New Orleans, they have struggled against shooting guards this year. Second highest usage on the team, obviously behind Schroeder. Can contribute across the board, so I think he's the guy I'll probably be looking at. I don't mind Prince over on FanDuel either. I'm not really looking at Schroeder here.
I think Prince and Bazemore are interesting. I might lean a little more Taurean Prince over Bazemore. I think he can contribute in a few other spots that Bazemore really can't. But Schroeder is interesting as far as GPPs only. We know that he's good in matchups where he can attack the rim. He leads the NBA in drives per game. He's driving to the rim 20.3 times per game. New Orleans does struggle to defend the rim. They're allowing opponents to shoot 65% in the restricted area. This is a spot where we could see Schroeder come out and put up a decent game. He did it twice last year. I think he had over 36 fantasy points in both contests. You could use him in GPPs. You could use Prince, Bazemore. None of these guys are cash viable, though.
No. Minnesota, Utah, actually a game that we can talk about. Probably maybe last year we would be kind of off of this one, but obviously no Rudy Gobert. A kind of a good spot here. There's a ton of value that opens up on this Utah side.
There is a lot to love about this game. If Gobert was playing, this would be a fade game for me, except for maybe the Rubio revenge narrative or whatever. But with Gobert out, there's so many options on both sides of this game that you can actually target, and this is a very stackable game, just like most of the other ones tonight.
Yeah, it really is. We'll start with this Minnesota side first. I actually have a little bit of interest in Jeff Teague. And I was kind of trashing Jeff Teague before the show, but I actually don't mind him here. He's pretty cheap. I mean, he's 6,500 on FanDuel. He's a guy who's kind of either on or he's off. I mean, 62 on DK. It's not a bad spot here. Kind of contributes across the board. I mean, the defensive stats can make up if his shot's off. So Utah, I think, will obviously take a little bit of a hit with Gobert out the floor defensively. They've been pretty average against point guards anyway, so I kind of like him as a GPP guy.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. Last year, whenever Gobert was off the floor and they had Favors playing the 5, the Jazz had a 107 defensive rating. That's not very good. And let's see, what are they this year? They're only giving up 99.6 points per game this year, so you could expect a few extra points in this matchup. The Jazz struggle to defend pick and roll ball handlers, and that's kind of where that's what Teague does a lot this year. 40% of the time, he's averaging 0.844 points per possession in those scenarios. So I think this is an excellent spot for Teague. I think Butler's going to be pretty popular tonight after he had a what you could call a breakout game. Here's the thing with Butler's breakout game. He attempted 16 free throws. 14 of his 25 points came from the free throw line. Butler in his career is averaging 5.6 free throw attempts per game. That is a complete outlier. Like, he's not going to come in and shoot 16 free throws again. Like, if he doesn't get those 14 points, that's a 30 fantasy point game out of Butler at 7,200. Like, you're not happy with that. He came out and said he wanted to score more and be more aggressive. Obviously, he was a little more aggressive because he got to the free throw line a bunch. But I'm not going to go back to the well on Butler. I would rather use Wiggins if you're looking at one of the wings in that spot.
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously that's a good point on Butler, and 30 points has basically been what he's been around the start of the season. Like, we haven't seen that type of upside, so finding that stat is pretty key to knowing that we're probably not going to see a ton of that moving forward. Any interest like Taj Gibson, like, he's still really cheap. Like, usually this is a matchup I probably wouldn't look at, but I think he's just playing well enough to kind of go out there and get you what you need. And obviously, I just don't think Utah is going to be that great of a rebounding team with Gobert off the floor.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I mean, we saw him play 37 minutes against the Suns last game. I think if Gorgie Jang sits this game out and Cole Aldrich sits this game out, I think Taj is an excellent cash and GPP option as price. The news on Gorgie Jang is going to be pretty important to watch because that's really what boosts his minutes, and that's really going to secure his role if Jang is out.
Interest in anyone else like Towns in this spot?
I do have some interest in Towns, actually. We mentioned they're going to be a little bit worse on the glass without Gobert there. And obviously, Favors not a good defender. I think Towns could probably kind of bully him a little bit. I would go there in GPPs. He's kind of expensive, though, at 8,600 on DraftKings. Price is down compared to what it was last game, though. So he's been pretty disappointing so far this season, but I think he's worth a shot if you're building 20 lineups or something like that to have a couple with him in it.
Yep, I agree there. On the Utah side, a lot to kind of go over. Obviously, we had the Ricky Rubio revenge game against Minnesota. I like him here. He's still remotely mid-priced. The usage rate is something that's been a lot higher this year. And then you get the matchup against Minnesota. Like, it kind of all adds up for possibly a decent Rubio game, although I feel like I'm going to be let down.
It really could be, and I think the loss of Gobert is actually going to help Rubio a lot. We were talking about it, before we started recording. He can run the pick and roll with Favors, and we know how deadly Rubio is whenever he can run the pick and roll with a big man that can kind of get in the paint because he can throw the fancy Rubio bounce pass. I think this is an actual really, really good spot. Obviously, put up a good game against them last time out. That one was in Minnesota, if I recall correctly. This one back home in Utah for him. So maybe the revenge narrative won't be as strong, but I do like Rubio a decent amount in this spot. Usage is down because Donovan Mitchell is basically just doing everything for this team. He's in the starting lineup now. They moved Rodney Hood to the bench. I do like Donovan Mitchell a significant amount here too.
As far as the front court guys, I mean, we saw Cephalosha, play power forward. Obviously, still really cheap. I mean, I just think on a minutes and production basis at that price, like, he's okay cash. I might look elsewhere in GPPs though.
I think he has upside. Like, if you're looking on DraftKings, he's 3,700. On FanDuel, I know he's up there. He's at 4,100. He has upside in GPPs on DraftKings, probably not on FanDuel. His performance last game against the Nets obviously was boosted by 5 steals, but that's kind of what Cephalosha is. Like, he gets a lot of his value on the defensive end of things. Anytime you move a player down a position and you move him closer to the basket, it's going to up his floor. I mean, he had 9 points, 9 rebounds, 1 more point, 1 more rebound in a matchup like this, and, he could put up a double-double. It's a decent spot for him. He can kind of stretch the floor, hit from the corner. The Timberwolves struggle to defend corner threes, so I do like him. I think he's both cash and GPP viable, especially on DraftKings.
Then we obviously saw Favors, move to the 5, play huge minutes. Once again, it's kind of tough to kind of get what these guys are going to produce because we saw that matchup against the Nets where you expect that type of stuff. A spot here where he's got to deal with Towns, who's, obviously not a good defender. I don't mind Favors tonight. There's a couple other power forward centers around that range I kind of want to look at too. But no denying that obviously he's a guy I think we should be keeping in our lineup making process.
I think it's site dependent. If you're looking at DraftKings, he's only 4,600. It's really tough to fade him at that price range. FanDuel, he's up to like 5,400, a little bit easier there. He's pretty much a lock on DraftKings for me. I think he's cash viable on both sides, has upside that he can hit. We saw him hit it against the Nets. This is an excellent spot. We know Towns can't play defense. I think I saw a tweet, and I can't remember who it was, that likened cat defense to like an actual cat chasing a laser pointer on the wall. That's basically what it is whenever he's out there on defense. It's a good spot. Minnesota's giving up a bunch of points in the paint, a decent amount of second chance points. They can't defend the rim. Everything lines up for Favors to put up another excellent game. We saw him put up 25 fantasy points in 28 minutes against this Timberwolves team last time out. You expect him to play 7-8 more minutes. I mean, 32, 35 fantasy points is a realistic outcome. And at 4,600, I'll take that all day.
Yep. Lakers Suns 227. This is probably a game that's going to obviously garnish a ton of ownership, really on both sides. Probably with the Lakers side, recency bias, and then you look back at the Lonzo Ball matchup against the Suns, where I believe he was one assist away from a triple double. Then, still in that mid price, I kind of expect Ball to be actually one of the higher owned point guards of the night.
Yeah, I actually did too, and I was really hoping that he went off against the Bucks. He went off for a triple double, put up like 70 something fantasy points against the Bucks. I was really hoping that wouldn't happen because I was already like looking forward to tonight's matchup and hoping that he would just come off a stinker because we could get him at lower ownership. I mean, against the Suns team, they're one of the worst. They are the worst team in defensive efficiency against the point guards. He's playing a bunch of minutes. The team is better with him on the floor. In GPPs, you could make a case for fading him. That being said, I think the upside that he represents at that price, it's really tough to fade him, even though he's going to be heavily owned. I absolutely love him in the spot. I wrote him up in my GPP article. Just a huge ceiling against his Suns team. I mean, he put up 59 fantasy points against them last time. So excellent spot for Lonzo. I want to have a bunch of exposure to him. I want to have exposure to everyone in this game. Like, everyone in this game is in play. Like, there's not a single person that you could probably mention except for like Luol Deng and like Corey Brewer that I wouldn't have interest in.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the pace of obviously these sides and the potential it's going to be basically the score, with this total 227. Yeah, I mean, Ball's obviously a guy you want exposure to. Like, he's probably going to be good chalk because of the fact that he's in such a great spot. He contributes across the board. He rebounds well. Yeah, I mean, the price is obviously still not high enough for probably the potential outcome that he's going to have. Not that there's other pivots to be had. I mean, you can play Rubio, you can play Schroeder, Peyton we'll get to in a little bit. Like, so there's some other moves that you can make off of him. And you can maybe hope that he only gets 30 to 35 fantasy points and kind of has a down game by the matchup standards. So there is that potential. Like you said, I mean, really on this Lakers side, there's a ton of options. I mean, KCP is still really cheap. Like, I don't mind him. He's playing decent minutes. He hasn't been producing, obviously coming off a down game against Milwaukee, but he hasn't been great. But he's going to get you probably 25, 30 fantasy points.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the biggest appeal with him is obviously the minutes and his ability to shoot. I mean, he's coming off, you mentioned a down game against Milwaukee. A couple of these past couple of games, he hasn't really shot the ball well. Going against a Phoenix team that is allowing opponents to shoot 47% from the floor and almost 40% from three, you expect that to change. I'm down with KCP. You could talk me into Clarkson. Both those guys, excellent options at the shooting guard position. Ingram coming off a bad game. Expect him to bounce back here. Kuzma has scored double figures in 11 of his last 12 games. You could definitely go there as well. And then Brook Lopez. I think you could make a case for Brook Lopez as well in cash games, just because the matchup is really solid. And then I think Randall is probably one of the best GPP plays on the board at only 5,300.
Yeah, I'm with you. And when's the last time that we've really actually seen a solidified minutes rotation for the Lakers? I mean, really outside of Randall, Kuzma's the guy who's playing a ton of minutes. Ingram's playing a ton of minutes. KCP, we know Ball's going to play minutes. Like, we actually got a pretty good floor here with a lot of these guys, and then basically the best fantasy matchup is always against the Suns. At these prices, I mean, I don't know how you don't make them a part of your core.
Yeah, you kind of have to. Like the matchup, the minutes, everything lines up for this to be just an excellent spot to get a ton of fantasy exposure. You could probably build a lineup that just stacks this entire game and be successful on tonight's slate.
Yeah. And you mentioned Kuzma, obviously a solid play. He's one playing heavy minutes, still fairly cheap. Obviously had a couple down games in that stretch. I mean, it wasn't great against Memphis, Boston, Washington, rebounded really well against Milwaukee. So I'm back on board. And once again, he's probably too cheap.
Yeah. Again, can't argue with anyone on the Lakers side of this game except for Luol Deng and Corey Brewer and Josh Hart and those guys that aren't playing minutes.
On the Phoenix side, when we look at things, we'll start with this backcourt. Mike James, Tyler Ulis. It hasn't been really appealing outside of the one big game that Mike James had, 1 or 2 weeks ago. It's been kind of pretty casual where he's around 25 fantasy points. It's not a ton of usage. It's kind of more Booker taking a lot of the lead here in this offense and Warren on the side. So I don't know if I have a ton of interest in this, even though it's a good spot.
Yeah, I mean, James has been a decent cash game play for the majority of the season since Bledsoe was benched and then traded out. Obviously, last game did not get the start. They started Ulis over him. There's rumors that it was disciplinary because apparently he threw the ball at Dragon Bender in an aggressive manner. It wasn't like a pass. It was actually like trying to peg him with the basketball, apparently. So that's the situation to keep an eye on. I mean, it's going to be a timeshare regardless. I would prefer James in cash games just because I think he has, with the exception of Minnesota, he has a 25, 26 point floor. His price is still cheap enough where you'll take that. Booker would be the guy for me if you're looking in the backcourt. Usage is there. He's just been outstanding recently. I mean, coming off another huge game against the Timberwolves, he would be the guy that I would absolutely be looking at, even at 8K. Like that's still probably too cheap for what he can do.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if it was kind of site dependent because the 8K, like for Booker, kind of makes me feel a little bit uneasy, but I'm okay with it. Where 74 on FanDuel is a little bit more lenient. But I mean, you kind of look like 5 or more assists in each of the last 3 games. He rebounds in spots that you kind of expect him to. So if he's flying around the court and getting those peripheral stats, I'm more than fine paying 8K.
And this is an excellent spot. We talked about it the last time these two teams played. The Lakers struggle when it comes to boxing out. They're allowing 25 rebounds per game to guards. And if you're going to give someone like Booker a floor, I mean, he pulled down 11 in that game. I mean, he has an opportunity to pull down double-digit rebounds again. He was 2 assists shy of a triple-double. Like, if you're telling me that he has triple-double upside at only 8K, like I will take that all day.
How do you feel about TJ Warren tonight? Like, I kind of feel he's a little bit expensive.
I'm going back to the well on him as well. I know his price is up there, 6,200. He's been outstanding at home this season over the first 4 of Phoenix's 6-game homestand. They're on a 6-game homestand right now, averaging 22.8 points, shooting almost 54% from the floor. Again, we mentioned this is an excellent spot against a team that can't rebound very well. Warren is really great at crashing the glass. Lakers allow a lot of points in the paint. They can't really defend the rim, and that's kind of where Warren really excels. So this is a great spot for him as well. I think cash games is an excellent option. Upside may be limited for GPPs, but I mean, he can still get there. I mean, he put up 43 against his team last time out. Minutes have been up a little bit. I think you can look at him in both formats as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind him. when you kind of look at some of the other small forwards that maybe are a little bit cheaper, 15 and 2,000 cheaper, like, I kind of look at Ingram, Prince, those types of guys where I'm like, maybe I'll lean them instead and kind of take some savings. But obviously, you can't really argue with Warren in the spot.
Yeah, for sure.
As far as the bigs go, Marquise Chris, you got Tyson Chandler back, Alex Len. It's still not a complete comfortable situation. Chandler came back and played 27 minutes last game. If you're in need of a cheaper center, are you looking at guys here?
I'd lean Tyson Chandler, although I'm a little worried. He played 28 minutes, but he just didn't look very great out there. Only took one field goal attempt. Only had 6 rebounds. I'd probably lean him if you need a cheap center, but I don't know. I don't know that I can really get behind any of these options. Like Chris is probably going to get in foul trouble, and that's going to open things up for Lynn, who, guess what? He gets in foul trouble a lot too. Um, Man, it's so tough with these guys. I think Chris is GPP viable. Chandler probably cash viable. Lynn, if he can keep his hands to himself and stay out of foul trouble, could put up a decent game. But only played 21 minutes against this team last time out. Just didn't. He only scored 4 points. I mean, I guess GPPs as well, but just not really looking that way.
Yeah, I think your expressions pretty much sum it up. Like it's not that it's a bad spot. It's just these guys are so volatile.
Yeah, it's just I don't know how you can trust any of these guys in cash, just because they're all foul prone.
Yeah, Denver Portland here 209. We'll start with the Denver side of things. Obviously, if Harris is out, we saw Barton step into that lineup and play great. And he's still probably cheap enough if he's actually going to be the one playing, over 35 minutes. I don't know if I can see 37 minutes again, because I think he was just playing too well to be taken off the court.
Yeah, this is one that we're going to have to keep an eye on. If Gary Harris sits out, I have a lot of interest in this backcourt. If Gary Harris plays, then I'm pretty much off the Denver side of things completely. Barton, outstanding game. He basically was doing everything for the Nuggets last time out. Sees a little bit of a usage boost. Plays a little point guard, plays a little 2 guard as well. Like, I think this is an excellent spot for him against Portland, assuming Gary Harris is out. If Harris sits, I think Jamal Murray is also an excellent option. Sees a 6% usage boost as well. They played him off the ball a lot, where he was really able to shoot really well. It's a good spot for him as well. I think he could go there, assuming Harris sits. And then Moutier has just been outstanding as well. I mean, coming off, I guess, a down game against Orlando where he only played 23 minutes, but have been fairly solid too. So he's another option to consider in both formats, and you use him in cash games. Again, this is all assuming Gary Harris sits.
Yeah, I feel like Denver, really outside of Barton, if Harris sits, is kind of a GPP team for me tonight. Because the front court, it's in a really tough spot. Portland's been good against power forwards and centers this year. Yet I still have some GPP interest in Millsap and Jokic because of their upside. And they're going to be a lower ownership because the matchup really doesn't stand out at all. And I think on a full slate with all these other guys around them in those positions, like, they're going to be super low owned.
Yeah, I can see that. I can't get excited about Paul Millsap ever anymore. Like, he's just his role is just kind of weird in that offense. But Jokic would be the guy that I would look at. Obviously, he can put up a big game against just about anyone. So he would be the one guy that I think you could target. Again, GPP is only, not really a cash game option.
Yeah. On the Portland side, I don't really have a lot of interest outside of Damian Lillard. We could see a top tier one, point guard obviously drop off if Curry sits. Lillard for me, if you're paying up, I prefer him much over Wall. You mentioned obviously kind of slumping a little bit over the last 2 games, but obviously had a really good stretch before that. Once again, he drives the train here for this Portland offense at home. So I kind of, if I'm paying up, I'm going to go that route.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I think I actually am a little more interested in CJ McCollum. Obviously, he's probably going to have to pick up the scoring if Lillard continues to slump, and he kind of has done that. I think he's the guy that I have the most interest in here. I obviously don't don't hate Damian Lillard. Something to keep an eye on. It's his non-shooting hand, but he missed practice because of a ring. I think it's his ring finger on his non-shooting hand. Is expected to play, isn't expected to be affected by it, but it is something to keep an eye on. If he does happen to sit for whatever reason, I think McCollum just becomes an elite option.
Do you kind of see paying up at point guard to be a contrarian way tonight?
Maybe. I think yeah, actually, yeah, I would say most people probably won't pay too much, won't pay up. I think probably Lonzo's the most expensive. Most people will go site dependent, obviously, but I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah, so it kind of gives you a little bit of different lineup construction with you're kind of paying up for these small forwards or power forwards. Any interesting in the other guys here? Some of the you look at Evan Turner, Maurice Harkless. Some of these other guys are getting minutes here for Portland.
Turner's a decent option. Obviously, we know he basically consistent, like 20 fantasy points pretty much every single game, cash game viable at his price. Other than that, no, not really. I guess it's a Nurkic revenge game, but it just doesn't really excite me that much.
Yeah, one thing to note, I mean, he did not play down the stretch of that Brooklyn game. That was kind of weird. I mean, he only played 25 minutes. I don't even know if he saw the court in the fourth.
Yeah, I didn't watch that game. It might have had something to do with I think Brooklyn was still obviously extremely injured, so they probably played really small, and that could have had something to do with it.
But overall, not a game that you're really excited about.
No, not really, which is strange because both these teams should be able to put up a decent amount of points, but there's so many better spots I think tonight.
Yeah. Golden State Orlando 232 total here. Golden State 14-point favorites. Obviously we're kind of watching the point guard news on both sides. Like that's going to basically dictate this game. Yeah,
how things play out with this game could have a very big impact on the slate. Obviously, Steph Curry is listed as questionable. This would be an excellent spot for them. Just kind of let him rest. He has, his thigh? His right thigh. He has a contusion. We saw them be a little careful with Kevin Durant, kind of in the same situation a few games back, where they said, he could play, but it's the regular season, so it doesn't really matter. I think they take that route with Curry. So I wouldn't be shocked if he sat. And then, of course, Elfrid Payton, we're going to have to keep an eye on that, dealing with that hamstring. Probably suits up. But, again, news that we have to keep an eye on because both these guys could have a very big impact on how this game and the slate play out.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Payton since he came back. I mean, played 29 minutes against New York. Obviously had a great game, 16 against Phoenix and sat out against Denver. Basically with the health of their point guard situation, they are pretty limited. They're not going to push the pace with Payton. I think he's a good GPP play tonight if he plays. I'm kind of in that boat. I think actually Orlando are actually kind of filled with great GPP plays.
I think, yeah, pretty much everyone from this game is an excellent GPP option. One of the reasons why I actually like the Orlando side a little bit better if Elf plays. So far this season, I know it's a very small sample size, but Orlando has a 118.8 offensive rating when he's on the court, a 104.8 when he's off. That's like they have a 19.3 net rating whenever he is on the floor. If he plays and Steph Curry sits, I think Orlando is able to keep this game close. And then Elfrid becomes a decent option. Fournier and Gordon are both excellent options, although I would expect Gordon to struggle a little bit with Draymond probably defending him most of the game. Vucevic would be just probably my top GPP center option on the board, assuming Elfrid plays and Curry sits.
Yeah, he's a guy with the price coming down, a couple of duds here. We haven't seen a huge upside game out of Vuce in a while. These prices are awfully intriguing, especially 73 on DK. You can roster a couple centers if you want. He's 77 on FanDuel. Good spot for him. Like you said, I like Aaron Gordon in GPPs. Obviously, with Draymond, it's a little bit tougher, but I expect him to still produce and rebound. He's been shooting really well this season. Fournier, I think, is a little bit intriguing too at his price over on FanDuel. Like, he's still pretty cheap. You can't deny that he has decent upside. It's a little bit of a tougher spot for him.
Yeah, obviously he's coming off a couple down games. I think one of those was limited by the fact that he didn't play more than he's played 27 minutes in back-to-back games. Um, but before that, against the Knicks, we obviously saw the upside that he possesses. He's an excellent option. Again, everyone from the Orlando side of things is a great option, assuming the chips fall the way we hope they do with Steph sitting and Elford playing. If this game blows out, I would be remiss if I did not mention Mo Buckets, Maurice Spates. Um, it is a revenge game for him, and he's going to play a few extra minutes anyways because Jonathan Isaac is out. But we were talking about it before we started recording. When he comes into the game, he does nothing but shoot. Like played 18 minutes against Denver, took 12 shots. Played 22 minutes against the Pelicans, took 11 shots. 18 minutes against Cavs, took 10 shots. Like at 3K, he may be cash viable if you expect this game to just blow out. You can just plug him in and he come into the game, play 14 minutes, and put up like 24 fantasy points against his former team.
There's a reason why he's called Mo Buckets.
Because he gets Mo Buckets. Yeah, I actually like him a lot here. I would not be afraid to deploy Mo Buckets tonight.
On the Golden State side of things, if Curry sits, obviously my interest in basically all the other starters just goes way up. Durant, once again, he's cheaper of the kind of three elites, small forward options. And then Draymond, those types of guys, Thompson. Like I have a lot of interest here. If it's a full rotation, I don't have as much because I think there's higher ceilings elsewhere.
Yeah, if we don't get news on Curry, I would probably I want to get exposure to this game because it should be really high scoring, but it's really tough to envision any of these guys playing more than 28, 30 minutes. I do like Durant a lot if Curry sits. 33% usage this season with Curry off the floor. Klay Thompson 27%. Draymond Green only 15%, but his production goes up a little bit as well. Those would be the guys that I would look at if Curry sits. I wouldn't even shy away from some Swaggy P here. We've seen him come in and play 21 minutes in back-to-back games. Put up 32 fantasy points against Timberwolves, 25 against the Sixers. Would probably pick up a few extra minutes if Curry sits. He's another one of these cheap options that you could consider if the chips fall the way that we hope they do.
Yeah, and if Curry plays, I think Draymond's the guy I would probably get my exposure through, just because, he's one of the cheaper options in comparison to the other guys. We've seen him put up, 35, 40 fantasy points in 28, 29, 30 minutes where, he would probably land in still if there was a blowout. And at that price, I don't mind it.
Yeah, he has the upside just because, he's an excellent rebounder. He doesn't really need to score to put up a decent fantasy game. So, yeah, that would be the way that I would look if he plays. And I forgot to mention Jonathan Simmons. I do like him a little bit on the Orlando side. If Elfrid is out, he'll, see some of the blowout run as well. So Simmons is a guy that I would look at if Elfrid doesn't play.
Yeah, he's been above 20 fantasy points in each of the last three games, kind of stapled into that role of playing, 20, 25 minutes.
Yep.
Sixers Clippers, last game of the night, 218 total. I feel like this one's actually pretty high.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like, with the way things should play out with Beverly and Gallinari out, this could be actually a pretty high scoring game that we may want to get some exposure to. It's a stackable game, that's for sure. And you could kind of get the late night hammer going.
Yeah, we'll start with this Philly side here. You mentioned the Embiid price over on DraftKings where he got down below 8K. Not a bad spot here. Obviously, his usage, we can continue to look at him. I kind of like him and Ben Simmons as contrarian options tonight because I actually don't think this game's going to be all that popular.
I don't think so either. I think people are going to glaze over it. Embiid, obviously, just in a great spot. The Clippers, not that great against the center position this season, which is contrary to what most people might think. They rank 24th in the NBA. They're giving up like 56 fantasy points per game. Would be an excellent spot for Embiid to kind of come out and put up a huge game. He's coming off against the Warriors, only played 25 minutes. If you pencil him in for 30 minutes against in a decent matchup, I think he could come out and at 7,900 on DraftKings. Like he has a lot of upside at that price.
Yeah. FanDuel, I mean, are you entertaining him at all? He's 88.
Probably not. Like I would rather have, obviously, I would rather have Cousins. I would rather have Towns, and I would rather have Vucevic or Gasol a little bit cheaper.
Yeah, I think so too. The only other real couple guys that interest me on the Philly side, Robert Covington for me just still continues to be too cheap. He's a guy who's, obviously, yes, he's sort of risky, but playing reasonable minutes. At these prices, he's kind of doing it all a little bit, and he also has that steal upside. So I kind of like him in this spot.
Yeah, he's definitely interesting. I think the guy that I actually like the most outside of Embiid and Simmons would be probably Saric. Obviously, he's still probably too cheap for the production that he can put up. And I'm actually pulling it up right now, but going into their last contest, whenever Covington, Embiid, Redick, Saric, and Simmons were on the floor, like Saric actually led the team in usage. And that's obviously the projected starting lineup. Yeah, they have 43 minutes together. He leads the team in usage at 26.4%, averaging 1.02 fantasy points per minute. I think this is an excellent spot where you could look at him. I think I actually like him a little bit more over Covington, but you really can't deny the upside that Covington has.
As far as the backcourt goes, obviously we got JJ Redick heading back to his old home. Decent spot for him, obviously, just because of the backcourt issues in terms of injuries with the Clippers side.
Yeah, and I mean he's just been outstanding for this team recently. I mean, if you just pull up his game log and look, like, where is he? 34, 27, 27, 47, a 13 stinker against Atlanta, but 34 before that. Uh, this is an excellent spot. Obviously, we have the revenge game narrative. Something that I do want to mention, the Clippers, the worst team in the NBA defending spot up shooters, allowing 1.16 points per spot up possession. They're allowing opponents to shoot an effective field goal percentage of 61% on those shots. And Redick is a spot up shooter. I mean, 24% of his possessions are spot up possessions, averaging 1.06 points per spot up possession. It would be an excellent spot for him to come out and just kind of destroy the Clippers from three. And yeah, I think you could lock him in GPPs at 4,800 on DraftKings, especially.
Yeah, no, I like him, and it's kind of weird to see that he's had 13 assists over the last 3 games. Not something that we usually tend to see from Redick. I'm kind of curious if that's taken a little bit, obviously, from TJ McConnell, who's the minutes have been there, but the production's dropped significantly, really, over the last week and a half.
Yeah, and if he's going to continue to do that, I mean, it really is tough to fade him. Just, I mean, if he's adding in those assists, that's just boosting his floor. I guess he's kind of always been a guy that you would consider only a scorer, but with him distributing the ball a little bit more, that really helps his floor and his upside.
Yep. And on the Clippers side, I mean, really, we got a couple of shooting guard options: Austin Rivers, Lou Williams, both playing huge minutes. We've seen Lou Williams give you that big ceiling game, and I can't deny they're actually using both of them.
I think I would lean Lou Williams a little bit more. Obviously, I think he just has so much more upside than Austin Rivers, just because Lou Williams is a guy that can actually shoot the ball and score. Rivers just is a terrible shooter, terrible basketball player in general. But Lou Williams would be the guy. But I mean, Rivers at 5,500 is interesting. The minutes have been there for him. I would just rather have Lou Williams because they're going to ride him a lot more, especially if this game is close and they're trying to pull out that win. I mean, you've seen them play Lou Williams 39 minutes against OKC in a close game, 36 against the Pelicans in a close game. The usage is there for him. He's got almost 30% usage rate with Teodosic and everyone else off the court. So Williams would be my guy, but I wouldn't say no to Austin Rivers either, but I think Williams has the higher upside.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, Williams is that clear-cut number one option when we're looking at the Clippers backcourt. Rivers is a guy I don't mind on FanDuel because he has some steals upside. We've seen a couple times before, and obviously his minutes are going to be above 30. He's just more of the pivot away from Williams if you're kind of building multiple lineups for me.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
As far as like the front court goes, I mean, Blake Griffin trending downwards in price. Like, it's not because he's been playing bad. We just really haven't seen a ton of upside. Like, he's kind of just hovering in like the 30s, the 40s. Like, we've only seen really one 50-point game out of him this year.
Yeah, I think he's struggling a little bit. Like the usage is still there whenever Beverly is off the court, but I mean he's at 36%. I think that's kind of uh, taken away from him because Austin Rivers and Lou Williams dominate the ball so well, and they don't get to run the pick and roll and stuff like that as much. But I do like him in the spot. It's an excellent matchup. He should be able to kind of dominate against a Sixers team that really struggles to defend bigs. I mean, I know if you look at it, their DVP or their efficiency against the power forward, they rank seventh in the NBA, but I don't really buy into that number that much. I think this is a spot you're not going to get very high ownership on Griffin, and there's gonna be one of these games where Griffin comes out and puts up just a massive number because he has so much usage. I mean, 37% almost. Like, I'll take that at 8,700 in a game where there should be a lot of points scored.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. Like, you kind of look here, he's in just a range of all these other options that we've seen the upside out of. So he's going to go overlooked. He's cheap. Like, you're getting a discount. If you can get that 50 burger out of Griffin for basically, 1,400, $3,000 less than Davis, like, depending on who you're looking at, that's a nice little bargain. And like you said, he's going to be low owned. So yeah, I don't mind him. I mean, I think he's probably the only other Clippers option I'm looking outside of Rivers and Lou Williams, because DJ's the guy that I'm kind of done with.
I would maybe have a little exposure and GPPs if you're doing a bunch of lineups. Again, kind of like if you're doing like 20 lineups, I would probably have one or two of him. But there's a lot of options in that price range that I would prefer a little bit more. You might see a lot of people on this Sindarius Thornwell, Juwan Evans train. Obviously, they're both playing like 20-something minutes. It's a decent matchup, but neither one of these guys has upside. They're not NBA quality players. They're both kind of terrible. People apparently think Thornwell is a great defender. I've watched most of the minutes that he's played, and he's just looked absolutely lost out there on defense. So I don't know that I buy into his defensive prowess at all. But I mean, if you need a cheap option in cash games, go for it. Neither one of these guys has any upside in GPPs.
Wesley Johnson, are you looking at him at all?
No, I hit the gold on the Wesley Johnson upside in that first game whenever he scored like 26 fantasy points at like 3.4K. I'm not gonna try to predict that one again. So Wesley's a fade for me.
It's like walking up to the blackjack table and you win the first hand, and then you go, "That's enough. I'm gonna walk away."
Yeah. Like, I made my money. I'm good. I'm gonna walk away now. Like, I don't need to do that one again.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement. Yeah, that's it then. I mean, really a fun slate, a lot to look out for still, obviously, with some of the later injury news. But I mean, overall, this is going to be a fun one.
Yeah, a lot to digest, but this is an excellent slate. This might be the best slate that we've had in quite a while, which is awesome because the past few like 4 or 5 days have been pretty gross slates. Actually, pretty much the entire last week was gross slates. So hopefully it's a sign of things to come with this week. Hopefully we get a lot of great slates like this.
And as always, to wrap things up, who do you guys your highest scoring tonight? I want to put a limit on it, but I won't.
No, let's put a limit on it. Let's say like no Cousins, no Davis, no LeBron, no Giannis.
Okay.
You know what? I'm gonna go with Blake Griffin.
I like that. I mean, I kind of want to just say Ball. Like, Lonzo Ball's going to go out there and drop a huge thing, but I feel like that's kind of chalky. Give me Porzingis. I'll say Porzingis.
Oh, Porzingis isn't chalky? Really?
Well, I mean, Ntilikina, do you want me to say that? Is that it?
Ntilikina is going to put up like 80.
I'll be Jokic, actually, to be contrarian. That'll be he's the highest scorer. So.
Okay, there we go. That's contrarian enough for me.
All right. That's it for us. Once again, you can head over to dailyfantasycafe.com, check out the great tools and content, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Have a good one.